What does it really mean to build and sell an ethical business? Not in theory, not in hindsight, but while you're in it, with real people and real responsibility. In this episode, we kick off our third season with a conversation that quietly resets the bar. I'm joined by Gina Schaefer, founder and retired CEO of a $50 million 13-location Ace Hardware business. Gina didn't come from retail. She didn't set out to build a hardware empire either. She was laid off, needed to pay a mortgage, and saw a neighborhood that needed rebuilding. So she opened a hardware store. And by removing the felony checkbox from job applications, she began hiring people coming out of prison and people in recovery. It wasn't a strategy or brand play, it was a human decision that shaped the culture and identity of her business. And the community richly rewarded her for it, showed up for her, and gave her business a nickname Gina never would have given herself: Recovery Hardware. This episode is about building real value and choosing how that value is carried forward. I'm Hannah Sandmeyer, and this is Ethical Exits. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Ethical Exits, the everything M&A podcast for purpose-driven companies exploring mission-driven, values-based business transactions, buying and selling businesses, but ethically. And today's guest I'm super psyched to have Gina Schaefer on our pod. She is the founder and retired CEO of Ace Hardware Stores. You've likely seen Gina, or at least her glasses, maybe everywhere. Gina gets around. So super stoked. I consider her an internet celebrity and now hopefully a friend. Gina, after what we just went through, we'll talk about that later. But Gina, not knowing much about retail beyond being a cashier in your early younger years, you started this business and you grew it from one location to 13 locations and 50 million in annual revenue and employing over 300 team members. And now, Gina, you're turning your attention to focus to sharing your knowledge, paying it forward, and you're focusing on creating positive corporate cultures, effective succession planning, which is huge because, as we know, most founders, the vast majority of them, do not have a succession plan, and also empowering women in business. And you are now inspiring audiences with your compelling stories and actionable insights, motivating them to drive change and achieve success in both business and life. So you've lived a wonderful life. You continue to pay it forward. We're so happy to have you. Welcome to the show, Gina.
I feel that's it's like such a wonderful opening. Thank you. I feel so impressed with myself.
You should. You're a fan of your own fan club. I love it. Right. You should.
Our fan club should start with us, in all honesty.
I mean, actually, I think that's right. I think that's one of the things you say is like, we are the ones we're waiting for. We can't be waiting for other heroes. We are the hero, right?
Years ago, somebody called me a shameless self-promoter. And I realized, I was talking about my business, and I realized that if I didn't talk about my business, our business, nobody else would. And so we have to toot our own horns. We have to brag about our teams. We have to talk about our products and services. Otherwise, who else is going to know we're out there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Especially being a woman in the business that you ran, right?
Yes.
Such a void there. And I don't think that people really in that space tend to promote just in general. I mean, it's not a Silicon Valley VC backed
No, there's nothing sexy about hardware. Nothing sexy about hardware. No. And the competitors are huge.
Yeah.
I have to figure out how to be louder than the big box stores, the online behemoths, the companies in competition that have more money, more employees, more resources, in a lot of cases, more government regulations on their side. I mean, how am I going to do that when we're this teeny tiny little organization? So, there you go.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable for a lot of folks who listen to this podcast. They're smaller entrepreneurs, a lot of them even solopreneurs, or between the 1 and 10 million range, surely.
Right.
So, and I think a lot of us enter the space this in a similar way that you did. So, Gina, if you've listened to our show, we always start and end the same way. With the first question. So you call yourself an accidental entrepreneur, which is very heartwarming and I think very relatable because I think that's how a lot of us, we just kind of like fell into it.
Yep.
And when you opening your first hardware store again without a background in retail, right? And I don't see you as like a carpenter type, like I don't
No,
see you as
no,
like,
you're right.
right. So, what values or experiences can you identify if you think about that from your early life that guided you most deeply and have shaped the way that you're built or the way that you think or the way that you respond or the way that you act and to get you to a point where you said, well, shoot, I am the one we're waiting for, and I'm going to build a few cool hardware stores, as you refer to it. Like, how did that happen? Tell us that story, Gina.
Well, I think to really hone in on your question, to really answer that question, I think it all really goes back to community. Now,
Mm,
I also like to remind myself that hindsight's 2020 and everything sounds
mm,
like, oh, I had all these, like the roadmap was planned for me, or I could see the vision as we started. None of that's true. A lot of it is happy accidents. I think you have to earn luck. We worked our butts off to be lucky. Um,
mm,
but I grew up in a small town. We knew everybody. It was very
mm,
tight knit. We had all of the things that a small town wants: a grocery store, a pharmacy, a hardware store. And now I joke that, not well, I don't joke. Communities in big cities act just like small towns. And if you take the three things I just mentioned, throw in a daycare center and maybe a liquor store, and my little
you got a
hometown,
neighborhood.
that's it, right? My little hometown is exactly the same as the
Mm,
neighborhood where we opened our first
mm,
location. So that location was still reeling from the riots when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. It
mm,
had sat dormant for decades, just full of crime and boarded up houses and empty lots.
mm,
And all of a sudden in DC, Washington, DC, where we are, people started moving into this neighborhood because it was inexpensive. We could
mm.
afford to buy there. And in order to do that, we had to pull boards off windows. We had to clean up the trash. We had
Oh, wow.
to renovate the kitchens and the bathrooms. And there was no place, very few places, to
Mm,
do that comfortably. And, I like to think that because we were city kids, we didn't want to go to the suburbs to buy the things we needed. We wanted to walk to do it.
mm,
And
mm,
so the closest hardware store was about a mile to get to and back. Nobody
mm.
carries a gallon of paint for a mile. We wanted it to be right outside of our front doors.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
really this is a long answer to your question. Community is really at the heart of it because that community growing that neighborhood was very supportive. They were very active. They were very vocal. And I say I was part of that community. We were very vocal about what we needed and wanted in order to grow.
Excellent. So that it actually almost seems kind of obvious, but it not all people respond like you, where they can see or recognize a need and then actually do something about it. So
Well,
what
that's
makes you a
it.
doer?
Yeah. I am a doer, I have to admit. Well, I got laid off from my job.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
if I really think about it, so I was part of the tech boom and bust of the late 90s.
Yeah.
I had been laid off three times.
Yeah.
And the third time I was laid off, by the third time, I had moved to this neighborhood, Logan Circle, where we opened our first location. And
Hmm.
I needed a job.
Hmm.
And I knew I wasn't cut out to be in IT. I knew it.
Hmm.
And I really liked tangible, practical. I'm a crafter. I do things with my hands. I like scissors. I cut and I
Oh,
paste
wow.
and all of that fun stuff. And I like being involved with community. And so I think when all of those things came together, and
Hmm.
I liked the practicality of hardware stores,
Hmm.
and I needed to help my husband pay our mortgage because I
Hmm.
no longer had a job.
Hmm.
Um, I, it just all came together.
Yeah. So you went for it. So
I did.
when I think about it really was a means to an end. It wasn't really about the hardware or that you wanted to go into retail or that you had, that this was like your childhood dream. female,
No.
female entrepreneur running a hardware store. But it really, like you said, it was about urban revitalization that you saw
Yes.
that core need, community inclusion, and then you added this element, which I think is unmistakably you, and you talk about it now. I think you've written a book about it. This unconventional culture building and how that all of those pieces came together. So it was it was a means to an end. It wasn't a hardware store. It wasn't a retail play. It wasn't about market share opportunity, or yes, it was a way where you could employ yourself, which is tremendous. And it provided that benefit to you. But tell me a little bit about what you talk about as recovery hardware, which I think is one of the most unique aspects of how you actually built this business. Because Ace Hardware is a franchise, right? Is that correct?
Ace Hardware is a cooperative.
Cooperative.
So I'm glad that you brought that up. A lot of people don't know that. So there actually are no hardware franchises in the United States.
Oh, sure.
If you want to open a hardware store, you either buy from a wholesaler or you join a cooperative or some combination of the two. And so I reached out to the big co-ops at the time, and I ended up joining the ACE cooperative. And so every time we open a new store, we apply for a new membership in the co-op. So each store has its own membership in the co-op. There are a lot of similarities. I mean, I don't think you want to go into the differences and similarities of franchises and co-ops, which I'm happy to do. There are a lot of similarities, but at their very core, they're very different.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had no idea that was even like a thing.
A lot of people don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now don't you think it's even cooler? Oftentimes our customers are like, oh my gosh, that's even cooler.
Oh, so, no, 100%. 100%. It adds something to it. And then we'll talk a little bit later about how you transitioned as well, which also adds another cool element.
Yeah.
But I was really curious to kind of learn more about your recovery hardware and how you built your culture in a way that most people are not and would not consider, or they would consider a little bit more risky. So if you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So when we opened in that first location, and I keep saying we, so let me just define that for a second. Sure. I opened the first store in March of 2003, and I was a newlywed. My husband was super helpful in getting the store started. He would drop me off in the morning, come and work at night if he had to, work on the weekends. And then one day, about 3 months in, he said, "You're having too much fun. Can I join you?"
Oh my God.
So he quit his job. And so we, in the early days, after that first 3 months in particular, was Mark, who's my husband, and I, and then the team that we started to build around us. Mm-hmm. That team, the very first teammate, had been in prison for 17 years. Mm-hmm. We did not know that because we eliminated the felony box on our application. I thought it was, in hindsight, I remember saying, this is a rude question, which is a little weird way to frame it. So we eliminated it. At the time, it was still legal to ask if you had a felony in the District of Columbia. And so Tommy got a job with us, had been in prison for 17 years. My second teammate was in recovery for crystal meth because down the street from us was a clinic that had been opened in the 80s, primarily to serve gay men with the AIDS. The fallout, some of the fallout of the AIDS epidemic was drug addiction. And so the clinic had opened this amazing program for people in recovery. And so there weren't a lot of, there were people moving into the neighborhood. There weren't a lot of places to work. And there weren't a lot of employees like within walking distance, to come in and apply for a job. And so those two guys started working with us. And gradually, as we built trust with each other, they started telling me their stories. We ended up finding out that Tommy had been in prison for 17 years. We ended up finding out that, Shane was very, very early in his addiction process. And as a result of those learnings, we started just, it was lots of moments of empathy, I think, by working with very different people from us. I had never known anyone who was in prison. I had never known anyone who was addicted to a drug, at least that I don't think I did.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking of those folks as my non-traditional teachers, people who were having a hard time getting jobs elsewhere, with a lot of lived experiences that I could learn from. So I often say they made me a better leader, but I really think they made me a better human being.
Absolutely.
And so Shane was the first teammate. He's amazing. He got mad at us one day and he left. He said, "I never want to see you again." We laugh about this to this day. We are very good friends now. "I never want to see you again." But he went back to the clinic and he said, "Hey, go see the lady at the hardware store. She'll give you a job."
Oh, wow.
So somebody came and asked me for a job and said, Shane sent me. And then that person, whose name happened to be Mark, said, Shane told me to come see you. Before we knew it, we had all of these folks in recovery working in the hardware store. It was never planned. It was never a rule. We never said this is how we're going to hire. But it laid the foundation for building a culture of trust and really being transparent. One of my absolute favorite stories was years later, I was in the party supply section at the hardware store, and one of my teammates wanted to know about another teammate who had been in the hospital. And Lante starts talking, and he said, Mike and I were in prison together.
Ladies, it's time we talk about what happens when the women who keep everything running behind the scenes finally take ownership. You're ready for more control, more impact, but staying where you are won't get you where you want to go, and starting from scratch feels way too risky. So what if there's a third way? At Our Way, our women's acquisition entrepreneur ecosystem, we help women buy established, cash-flowing businesses instead of building from zero. When women take ownership, companies grow stronger and communities thrive. That's just smart economics. Learn more at ourway.com.
And when he got out, I said, you should stop using drugs because I'm going to stop using drugs. And I remember thinking, I'm in the middle of my business. Customers can hear us. Other employees can hear us. Where does this conversation happen? And I wish I were a cartoonist, because I think there's something even funnier, because we were in the party supply section. Like, picture balloons above his head. Like, and I thought, oh my God, we have built the coolest place to work, because he knows he can tell me that. He knows he can talk about it. And so about 14 years in, Mark, who was the third of the recovery folks, came to me one day and he said, hey, the community has started calling this place Recovery Hardware.
Holy shit.
And I sobbed. You can't give yourself a nickname. Sure as hell can't make up something as meaningful as that. We never, ever talked about it with our customers. We never bragged about it. Wasn't programmed into how we hired, but people noticed. Wow. And that community especially noticed. And so people for years had been asking me to write a book. And I was like, no one wants to read a book about a chick running a hardware store. I always said it exactly like that. And then he said, hey, they're calling us Recovery Hardware. And I was like, first of all, that's a really good name for a book, whether people agree with me or not. And two, it also means I can tell their stories with their permission, of course, not my story. And so it's just, it's become, to me, it was really, it was a beautiful exercise. It's painful. Have you ever written a book?
No.
No. It's a lot of work. It's like starting a new business. It's like starting a podcast.
I imagine so. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was really, really gratifying to, ask for permission to tell your stories, to write sort of anthology, memoir, short story kind of book. And so that's the story of Recovery Hardware.
Oh man, that's so beautiful. I can't tell you, Gina, I love the work that we get to do, because we get to meet people like you. And there are so many days where I cry, right? Where I tear up, because the stories are so meaningful and they move me. And that's certainly happening here.
Thank you.
And it makes me reflect on what you said at first too, is that this is an exercise for you to be a better human. Yeah. Right. And that's how you approach business, rather than just a purely capitalistic enrichment vehicle, which surely is a good one. And that, I think that worked out for you largely. That happened too.
Right? It turned out. Yeah.
Yeah. But that you had the opportunity also to stretch who you were as a human. That is the most valuable work we can do. And I think it's so powerful, because, we're a B Corp, we're a certified B Corp. And there's so many B Corps that struggle with being profitable, or they struggle with talking about scale, but because they think that they're mutually exclusive. That is not true. That is not true. And that is a lie that we tell ourselves, and it only holds us back from doing the work, driving purpose in big, bold, beautiful ways. And you have certainly achieved that. So I am confident, not to get dark, but I'm confident in your final days that those will be things that you're able to reflect on and be at peace with.
Yeah, I hope so.
My God, and what a gift. And what a gift to give your employees, and that establishment of trust. You can't put a price tag on that. And I'm sure that only impacted your retention rates, your customer service, your customer satisfaction, the whole thing. So when you think about between, the products that you were bringing to to these communities, tools and paint and all the things that they needed to revitalize their community, or just ongoing maintenance, the community aspect of it, the community inclusion that you talked about, and this unconventional business culture. If you had to isolate one that you think built the brand fastest, market, how you did it, or the culture, what would you say, Gina?
That's okay. So it's a fantastic question. And I think I could probably figure out a way to answer it with all three of them winning. But we've had 2 stores over the years that failed. And so I would have to say that it's probably at its heart, the community support. Because if we had had more community support, meaning more buyers at the 2 stores that failed, they wouldn't have failed. And so, I want to think that it was us and it was the team, and, we love who we work with, all of that. But if a small business or any business doesn't have customers, they have no business. And so we opened in Logan Circle at the exact right time. The moment it was palpable, because people were moving in, and there was this, I always say there was this long abandoned retail corridor that was screaming with potential. And so there were restaurants that opened and stores that opened. Yeah. And so it was the community rallying around all of us that were opening up.
Amazing. Yeah. And thinking about your early in your journey, this took capital to build this business, Gina, right? Like, you're not just reach in your pocket and pull out some dimes and some pennies, and put together a hardware store. Imagine the inventory. Like, these are hard businesses to start. They're very expensive. Margins tend to be really thin. Overhead is really high. They're very, very complicated businesses. Brick and mortar is no joke, right? Especially in the age of today, like with tariffs and everything. Like, it's just really, really complicated. Supply chain issues, all that stuff. So, but early in your journey, I understand that you face barriers getting a basic business loan, and the challenges that many female entrepreneurs continue to face. Talk to us a little bit about that, or how that experience maybe shaped why you're an advocate for women in business today, and what, if any, changes you've seen in access to capital since then, or advice that you have for folks who are seeking capital.
The changes, that's the interesting question there, right? So we got an SBA loan. I got an SBA loan.
Nice.
Now, remember, when I was getting ready to open, this was prior to Mark joining me in the business. And so I was a solo femalepreneur opening in a very male-dominated industry. So and I was opening in a neighborhood that still had, hypoderm needles all over the ground and boarded up buildings. And people were like, why would you open a hardware store here? Because unless you lived there, you didn't really understand what was going on there. And so that was a challenge in itself, a story for another day. And then I needed to get a loan. And that first store, I think the first loan was probably around $350,000. So big, but not, it's gotten a lot bigger now. And I remember realizing that being told I was going to need an SBA loan. I went through the SBA route, and I had to over collateralize. Mark and I, fortunately, each owned a condo, and they took both as collateral. The bank did. And then I had to bring him in to sign the loan document. And he and I both talk about this, like, in hindsight, it makes us so. Now, I understand that we were married and there's like joint whatever. You can't just spend all your husband's money or all your wife's money. But I remember years later saying, do you think the bankers would have told him that he had to bring me to the meeting? He was like, no, probably not. No, it's crazy. And so that was a big barrier. We started banking 2 years later with National Cooperative Bank, and they have been amazing. So historically, banks discriminated against co-ops because co-ops usually have multi-ownership. ACE is a little bit different. Our stores are, but you think of a grocery co-op, there are 2,000 people that own a grocery co-op. The bank doesn't know how to loan money to them. And so they would just say no. And so in the 70s, the federal government chartered National Cooperative Bank to help fund co-ops. And so we were introduced to NCB through ACE. they've funded every single project since that first one. Yeah, every single project.
Way.
We found them in 2005, which is when we opened our second store, and they have funded all 15 projects since then, including expansion and purchases and the ESOP transaction. They have been part of all of that.
Wow. Okay. So that's what I wanted to talk about next. And that's, you actually raised a question that I had. So I was thinking like, so for the cooperative model, you have to go to ACE in order to open a new store, right?
Yep.
Apply for a new store, location, whatever. You're part of the cooperative, but then do you own that store, or do you continue to pay like the franchise style fee to ACE?
Yeah.
Like, how does that? Okay.
So I'm really glad you asked that, because that's where it starts to get a little tricky for people. So we are absolutely independent business owners. Everything is our dime, our decision, all of that. There are, when you go to a franchise, they hand you the franchise Bible, and it's hundreds of rules. You're going to charge this, sell this, buy this from this vendor. Talk this way. I mean, all of that.
Right.
ACE has very few requirements when it comes to that. There's some branding requirements in terms of buying into a national marketing campaign, and the signage. That's almost it. And then they say, this is 2,000 square feet of core product that you have to carry as a good hardware store. That's plumbing, electrical, hardware, hand tools, nuts and bolts, a little bit of housewares, and lawn and garden.
Okay.
I feel like I missed a department, but that's okay. Oh, paint. Sorry. So 9 paints. Duh. Yeah. They say this stuff fits in 2,000 square feet. Most stores are much, much bigger than 2,000 square feet. So beyond that, you think about whether or not you want those departments to be bigger, and then what maybe cool niches you have, what your neighborhood might be interested in, what you as an owner might be interested in. Put that stuff in your store, and it starts to get, and they don't dictate any of that. They have a lot of support in place to help us build those things out. And then cooperatives don't pay taxes on the profits they dividend back to their members. So ACE, as the mothership, if you will, makes their money by buying products at good prices so we can compete, warehousing it, and then reselling it to us at a markup.
Got it.
That's how they make their money. At the end of the year, they give us a dividend based on how much we bought from them. There's no royalty. We know it's not like the hamburger model where you give McDonald's 25 cents for every hamburger you sell, whatever the royalty is. They give us a return based on how much we buy from them. So the more loyal we are to the co-op, the bigger the dividend is that we get at the end of the year.
And did you feel like it's super cool. And so did you just kind of stumble across this, or just someone like, how did you find, when you knew you wanted to start a hardware store, was it always ACE, or did you like explore options?
So there's three big, there at the time were three big national cooperatives, ACE, True Value, and Do It Best. And so True Value, or Do It Best, is more Midwestern. We don't, there might be some closer to us now, but Mark remembers us just doing some research and figuring out who sells hardware, and emailing ACE and True Value, and ACE is the one that contacted us first.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it was as easy as that.
It was. Actually, I think it was probably 3 years later before True Value called us back. They've gone through some ups and downs themselves, which I understand now why it took them so long to call us back, and also why they've gone through the ups and downs, because had they been calling people back, maybe
they wouldn't have
the problems they had.
Pick up the phone, answer the call. Yes.
Now True Value and Do It Best are part of the same organization. Do It Best, I don't think they bought True Value, but they've essentially brought them on as a brand underneath them.
I see.
So they still exist as brands.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And that is what allowed you. So I think the financing structure is so huge to have that in your back pocket, where they helped you fund expansion. But of course, based on the models, the way you explained it, that only benefited them. So the collective is doing well when everyone's doing well, and they support each other through those things. Wow. Tremendous. Okay. So I think it was 2021, 2022, when you and Mark were like, okay, we should do something. We should plan our succession. We need to exit.
Yeah.
And you transition, as you said, you transitioned to an ESOP, which we've been talking a lot about this podcast, Gina, when we first launched this podcast, and we're trying to understand what an ethical exit is. We're trying to explore these different options, these different ways that you can sell and buy a business ethically. We were introduced to employee ownership models pretty early on. I was like, well, that's obviously it.
Duh.
It's like totally duh. It's like that is an ethical exit. If you can sell to your employees, I don't think there's a better way. I mean, there's no better way to acknowledge and honor the tremendous support that you received in building the business, and no one knows that business better than your employees. Of course, it's not as simple as that. You have to have a succession plan. You have to have someone who can take over. You got to be big enough. There's different costs to different models, but ESOPs probably get the most attention. There's a lot of chatter about ESOPs, and sometimes, depending on the space that you're in, they can be framed as a financial or tax strategy, right?
Yep.
Because you get the tremendous tax benefits. It's an ERISA wrapper. You're non-taxable when you start an ESOP. But in your case, I understand the choice was more about the mechanics. So I don't know if you could talk a little bit about that, or why you thought employee ownership was the right path for both you and your team, and how maybe it aligned with your mission and your values and your community-minded mindset. For too long, selling a company has meant profits for a few and pain for everyone else. It's time for a new model of buying and selling businesses, one built for all stakeholders, on values. Steward Market is that bridge. We're building the marketplace for ethical exits, where founders can sell with confidence, buyers can grow through values-aligned acquisitions, and the ecosystem of funders, CPAs, attorneys, and advisors can collaborate in one transparent hub, connecting every player in the deal-making process around a shared goal, making purpose-driven transactions easier to find, fund, and close. If you believe business transitions can create shared prosperity, not just shareholder value, join us. Sign up for early access at stewardmarket.com and be part of building the next era of impact-driven M&A.
Well, first of all, we had never heard of an ESOP. And when we finally did hear about it, we didn't understand a darn thing about how it operated. I mean, we were really, I think I might have said this when you and I were emailing back and forth. There's only 7,000 nationally. So we're still kind of a unicorn. It's also regulated by the Department of Labor, because historically, a lot of nefarious things were happening. People would sell the business through this vehicle called an ESOP. They'd make millions of dollars and walk away rich, and then the company would fall apart because it wasn't left with the structure, financial and mechanical, that it needed in order to survive. So we knew that it was a thing, but we didn't understand how it worked. The thing that we didn't understand was that the employees don't actually put any money in. You create a trust, and the trust buys the business on behalf of the employees. And I probably need to figure out a way to talk about this in a little more linear fashion. We figured that out. The light bulb went off. We're like, oh, we should start exploring whether this is something for us. And then, I'm sure, like during that time in history, there were a lot of protests happening around the country. There were a lot of protests in Washington, D.C. And if you remember at the beginning of the podcast, I said that Logan Circle, where our first story is, had been destroyed by the riots when Martin Luther King was assassinated. Those riots started just north of where our office is and went south down 14th Street in front of where our office is. So 14th Street was that main abandoned corridor. This was long before the store was opened, but that was what happened. And visually, we felt it because we moved there when the buildings were still boarded up and there were no businesses. Fast forward to 2021, those protests started. They started in the same place as the riots. They came right down 14th Street in front of our offices, but we were there. And so we would make signs. We would hang out the windows. We had cowbells, like all in solidarity of the protesters. And the protesters wanted generational wealth building, gender equality, racial equality, things that as a small business were important to us. And we felt like we were doing okay as a small business in figuring these things out. So one day Mark said, he said, let's walk with the protesters. And we went around the store and we asked every customer and teammate in the store that day if they wanted to go on a walk with us. And they all said yes. And we locked the door and we went on a walk. We didn't walk very long, like 15 or 20 minutes. And we came back and he and I were really emotional about the experience and like feeling like we had gotten out and then feeling like we could be something bigger than a small business as part of the. And that's when we really started digging into the ESOP thing. That's when we really thought, okay, we have this as an option. We know what society needs, wants, blah, blah, blah. Let's figure out what that looks like as an exit. And this is where I typically say, I am not Mother Teresa. I did not give my business away. We built a $50 million business. It'll be $55 million this year. And I wasn't going to walk away from that value. And you don't have to as an ESOP. A lot of people think, oh, you're handing it over. No, I'm getting the value that we built. We're getting the value that we built as an owner in this business. And now 130 of my teammates are building that value themselves, which is really cool. So we formed the ESOP. It took us about 9 or 10 months, I think, to put the whole program together. Since we announced in 2022, make sure I've got my dates right, we've distributed more than $3 million to our teammates who are owners, because you cannot be an owner in an ESOP if you quit or get fired. You have to be bought out. Yeah. So our little machine has generated $3 million in wealth for the people who have left or have gotten fired already. And, even more for the people who have stayed. So,
Amazing. So you feel really good about that as another way that you can contribute, being a for-profit business, and a way that you can contribute to the culture of society that you believe is most fair and just, where you can show up as a good human. And I love that. I love that intersection of politics and political action, to how that can transition into how you run your business. Because I think, there's no place you have more agency. Things change every 4 years, every 2 years, right? As far as, like social services and government services, but we can actually create those policies and how we want to treat each other in our private businesses, literally overnight if we want to. And it can be very, very powerful. How long did you hang out, Gina, after you did that? So you said you took about 9 months to do the transition. Did you stay on to train your successor? Was your successor someone that you promoted from within? How did that work?
We announced the day that we announced that we were forming the ESOP, I announced that I was going to step down. And it would probably be about a 2-year process. So I was going to stay through. So just to be clear, we've sold 30% so far. So 30% is the number that triggers a 1042 transaction. So Mark and I could take that 30% piece and put it into a non-tax account. It also, we knew that we wanted to make sure that the business continued and was safe and stable before we got to the 100%. Some ESOPs sell 100% day one. We did not feel like we were ready to do that yet. So I announced I was going to leave in 2 years. I also didn't know how long it was going to take to find a successor. We didn't have someone internally who we thought was ready to do it. There are lots of people who can do it. We certainly didn't think like, oh, nobody can replace us. And Mark is still there. He hasn't left. He's the CFO. So he's still there. Yeah. He'll stay through at least the next piece, I think, of the sale. I lost my train of thought.
But you didn't want to start. You didn't want to start with 100%. So you're slowly transitioning with the goal of getting to 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's one thing, I think. I grew up by building a business that got to 50 million, but to take someone who had never managed a $50 million business and say, hey, come be the CEO. So we ended up having when you surround yourself with wonderful people and you are wonderful to them, great things can happen. Craig Smith, who is our current CEO, owned a store in Fairfax, Virginia, an Ace store in Fairfax, Virginia. He had been in a hardware store owning family since he was born.
Oh, wow.
He had worked in a hardware store since he was 14, had owned his store for, I think, 10 years, and had managed multi-million dollars worth of revenue as in a hardware store. We asked him, we took him to lunch one day and we said, what do you think about us buying your store? Your employees, your teammates will become owners and you will be our CEO. And I think he thought about it I joke that he thought about it for 5 minutes. We did say, don't tell us, don't feel committed right now. The next day he called and he said, I want to know more. I think this is exactly the right thing for me. And so, we made that work. That probably took another, I should know this. It takes a while to acquire a business, no matter how easy the mechanics are. Even if you have a handshake deal, it could take a while. So it took us several months to make all of that work. And then I stayed for about another 6 months after Craig joined.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's working out well. What a wonderful opportunity for you and for Mark and for him and for all of his employees, and then your employees at a whole, to say that we're selling down, but we're selling to you. And then to also double down on that story. I think there's more and more energy around ESOPs getting acquisitive as well.
Yes.
Because it is such a good model. And when you think about where M&A transactions fail, it's often that integration piece, right? It's bringing cultures together and people getting scared. And of course they should be, because most M&A that you read about, most takeovers are not a good result for the employees. They're just waiting for the axe to drop, or for them to be named redundant, or, to receive their reduce in force notice. So to be able to say we were acquired, but now we're all owners, I can't imagine what that moment would look like. I know we've talked about it before in the podcast, but when New Belgium Brewing transitioned to an ESOP, how they told their employees by putting, do you know this story, Gina?
I don't know if I know. They are the reason that I know what ESOPs are.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if I know the story you're going to tell me.
Yeah, no. So this is the way I understand it. I heard this from Chris Michael. He's a founder of EOT Advisors. He helps companies transition it to employee ownership trust. But he was telling us that New Belgium, in a big beer brewing warehouse with cement floors and the aluminum chairs on the floor, so you can imagine all the noise that was reverberating off the walls and everything. And the founder stood up in front of all their staff, and they said, We've been acquired, right? And the whole room was like,
we've been acquired by you.
Well, yeah. So then they said, well, and everyone was like, well, who do we sell to? And they said, well, reach under your chair. There's a yellow envelope for everyone under the chair, right? So all the scraping of the chairs on the floor, and everyone's reaching under, and all the murmur, whatever. And they pull out this envelope and they reach inside, and there was a mirror inside.
Oh my gosh, I just got chills. I had never heard that story.
Yeah. I guess there's a documentary that was made about it where they talk about that. But I mean, talk about being a good human and paying it forward and creating tremendous outsized outcomes for your employees. What a day. What a day that would be.
We sent pies to all the stores with notes that said, we're sharing your piece of the pie. That was our announcement. I love the mirror though. Cool. We were in Fort Collins, and we went to the New Belgium Brewery, and the tour guide, she was probably like 22. She was bouncing off the walls, telling us that she was the owner. And Mark and I were like, how does, she was young. Like, how does she own the brewery? And that's when we were like, okay, we need to figure this out once we realized that they were ESOP, and that's how positive she was about it. So that's a great story.
Yeah, it's just so uplifting, and again, a reason why I love having these conversations is because it's just ideation, sharing, what's possible and how we can do this, and then like how rewarding it and satisfying it can be. I don't think there's a better exit. It's so from my understanding with yours is, which I think you relayed really well, is ESOP was a good model for you. You pursued it. It took some time. You went out and found a successor. You did it in a unique way. You bought their company at the same time and rolled them into the ESOP, which is amazing. And that's just more diversification in that ESOP holdco too for your employees. There's more stores, so the risk is spread out across multiple geos, bigger P&Ls, which makes a lot of sense for them. And then starting out with 30% employee ownership, but with the goal being 100% employee owned, and then a long-term hold, right? This isn't a flip type of exercise for you. Yeah, which is excellent. Okay, very cool. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. But it's thinking about like what's that look like from you, Gina? Because I can tell that you got a lot of satisfaction from running the business and from being an owner and everything that it brought to you. Probably you seem like a vibrant person, full of personality. But I can imagine it made up a big portion of who you are.
Huge.
And your self-worth. So after being a CEO for two decades, what helped you redefine who you are in this chapter? And what would you give other founders who are facing the same kind of maybe the same choice where they know that they have to do something, but they're afraid of who they might be without their business, and maybe some consternation about what that might look like or what that might result in for them emotionally?
I took my cues from a lot of older hardware store owners because they are
Mm.
lifers. It's a
Mm.
very traditional, historically
Mm.
multi-generational brick and mortar. I mean, not a lot of tech lifers.
Mm.
And I, I I wouldn't say I have a short attention span. That's not true at all. But I knew, well, 120 is a nice round number. I knew I didn't want to be a lifer. And we got through the pandemic. We started just
Mm.
talking about succession planning. And I realized that I didn't want to do this forever. I had so many other things that I wanted to do. This would be the time for us to explore it. Knowing that I loved my team, they were super important to me. But I also thought, somebody younger, newer, fresher, whatever, different ideas would then
Mm.
be able to take the business to the next level. And,
Mm.
I read these things all the time, especially on LinkedIn, like, well, I helped this person get their mojo back or get their interest back. And I mean, I think I could have gotten re-engaged in hardware for a month and then I would lose it again.
Really?
I have a very hard time believing that you can just like re-energize someone back into their business for another decade. And maybe that's just
Mm.
me, but it just felt like the right time. I knew I didn't want to be a lifer. There were other things I wanted to do. I'd always wanted to become a professional public speaker.
Mm.
And I was starting to think about how I could integrate that into my life, which meant I was spending less time on the hardware business. And that
Mm.
wasn't fair to my teammates who
Mm.
were working their butts off day in and day out. I knew I wanted to travel more. I didn't think that was fair for my back office team who needed a leader who was present and not always traveling.
Mm.
And so
Mm.
if I was really being honest with myself, which I wanted to be, they needed a new leader. And I also knew that we could figure out a way to monetize it
Mm.
so that I was leaving with everything on strong financial footing and being able to reap the benefits, of what
Mm.
we had been building for 20 years. Does that answer your
Mm.
question?
No, it really does.
Yeah.
So I think that makes sense to me as far as where you were, and I think that's really honest and vulnerable to say. Like, yo, I just wasn't that into it after
I
a period of
wasn't.
time. Like, I think that's really honest, you
Do
know.
people not say that? People don't say that?
I don't think people say that very often, but
No.
I really like that about you, Gina, where you're just like, no, like I want to be doing other things. Life is long. You spent 20 plus years doing this. Now you want to transition into something else. You have more to give. I think your interest in public speaking is because you do have a lot to share. And that's fun for you. That's fun
Yeah.
for you to be in front of new audiences, new people, thinking through different things and meeting other people who have different ideas from you. I can see how that's engaging. And then, of course, traveling. And I'm sure that you did not have a lot of opportunity to do that, probably for the good first decade plus,
Yeah.
where it was
Yeah.
really hands on. Right.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I feel like this time in history, and I know you know even more about this than I do, with the baby boomers about to really hit final
Yes.
retirement age and the tens of thousands of businesses that will either go on the market, be closed, transition, be gobbled up by, PE. There's so much
Mm-hmm.
opportunity and not enough people know what their options are. And I want everyone to talk about ESOPs, but more importantly, I just want everyone to talk about the options, to know what they are, to be very serious and methodical in evaluating them, to realize that family dynamics might mean you need a therapist. I mean,
Yes.
somebody like that
Yeah.
exists. Or, we hired a business coach to work with us when we were going through our transition. So, or a business coach. I want to be able to get on stages and talk to people candidly about what those options are. And that as painful as it might seem, or as uncomfortable as it might seem, it is part of being a leader at a business. And we owe it to ourselves and our communities and our team to do it.
Mm-hmm. And to not burn out and to make room for the next generation. I think you talked about that too, which is huge. I totally align with that. And yes, I mean, the silver tsunami is coming. And we cannot, the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, I was at SOCAP this year, and they estimated it to be to represent 127 trillion in value transfer in the next 5 to 20 years. So this is one of the biggest events we will see, right?
Yep.
And the vast majority of businesses and a good portion of our capita is from small, medium businesses. And these founders need to exit. And my hope is, yes, that they will find the resources that can support them through this from whatever angle that might be. Maybe it requires, some therapy or some additional emotional support, but also having confidence that they can find a values aligned buyer, that they're just not, that there's morally ambitious people, younger people, Gina, that see this moment and want to step up. I was actually talking to a B Corp out of Canada last week that had that perspective. He's like, I'm looking around the room. He's in marketing business. He's like, I'm looking around the room, and a lot of my peers and colleagues, my friends that I've, been in business with, he's been in business for over 15 years, and they're starting to get gray hair, and he knows they have to retire. And he's seeing that, and his response is, which I'm so grateful for, his response is, I'm going to step up for them. I want to find a way where I can partner with those companies, acquire those companies, and steward their mission and their legacy forward, and preserve and protect their jobs, the jobs that they have created. Right. We cannot let every single vet office in a small community be bought up by PE. Like, we cannot, right?
That's exactly what's happening.
You didn't start your business just to sell something. You started it to solve something. But solving big problems with limited resources, it's slow, it's hard. And in a market moving this fast, values need more than vision. They need velocity. This is the kind of challenge Up and Over Advisors was born to solve. We help mission-driven companies scale smarter through values-amplifying acquisitions. Because when ethical founders grow, capitalism gets an upgrade. We do the heavy lifting to find and qualify companies ready to partner or sell to someone like you. We don't just close deals, we open doors to broader impact. Ready to scale yours? Let's build the future on purpose. Visit upandoveradvisors.com to learn more.
And what is are they still saying the statistic is 75% of business owners don't have an exit strategy?
Yeah, it's something like that. It's well over 60. And then 80% of businesses don't sell. They will just close.
Oh, that hurts my heart when you think about how do you, I guess if you're a solopreneur, it's one thing, but if you have anybody on your payroll that is going to lose their job. Yeah.
This is real. This is real. And this is just one existential threat. We also have AI on top of it. Our communities, our local neighborhoods cannot survive this kind of consolidation or this kind of closure. That's the opposite of good capitalism.
Yeah.
Like capitalism.
So uninteresting. And it makes our community so uninteresting.
And then none of us can support anybody. I mean, if we don't have jobs, then the coffee shop doesn't stay open. The grocery store can't sell good goods. All that stuff matters. So, we talk about it in our business, like, sure, Occupy Wall Street. Sure. That has purpose, but Occupy Main Street. Show up there. Right. And like the programs that you talked about, SBA and other impact investors, there's now ETA clubs, entrepreneurship to acquisition clubs that are trying to erase the wealth gap or provide more opportunities for Black and brown entrepreneurs. All that stuff I think is really exciting. And the time is absolutely now. Now. And doing this with EO wrappers, I think, is really interesting. So employee ownership wrappers. So I don't know if are you going to the National Center for Employee Ownership's annual conference in April in Milwaukee, Gina?
I am. I'm speaking there. I'm giving a workshop. Yeah.
Me too. I'm also speaking.
Fun. We'll be in person. I've also never been to Milwaukee, so I'm super excited.
Me neither. So that'll be, we could go on a tour together. But yeah, for the very first time, they're having a whole track on acquisitions. So we're talking about, we're speaking about mission-driven M&A.
Nice.
And how you can do off-market sourcing. But yeah, so amazing. So there's this energy growing around it. So just to close, I have two more questions for you, Gina.
Okay.
And I'll just share with
I've
our
got
audience.
answers.
I talked about it at the top of the call, but Gina and I struggled probably for 15 to 30 minutes because she could not hear me and had to try multiple methods. I think you switched out every little thing on your laptop. Then you went to your iPad, which had no battery and only had a small charging cord that was not functional. Then you went to your phone. So we've been on. Gina's been with me for a while. We're like best friends now, but so I want to wrap up.
As we should be.
As we should be, it will only continue that in the glorious city of Milwaukee.
Yes.
I look forward to. But thinking about leading through growth, succession, and employee ownership takes a lot of resilience. I mean, just entrepreneurship in general, like you said, you just don't know what you don't know. You're learning things all the time, pivoting, working through different challenges. I imagine in your business, you always were looking for people, staffing, people come and go, that kind of daily disruption. But what practices or habits do you think have helped you stay grounded as a leader and help you stay you? Because I can see like you'd be a cool boss. Like, you seem like
Thank you.
Most days you'd be happy, you're positive, you're certainly something that people can share their deepest, truths with, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But what would you share for other founders that maybe are just starting out or maybe really struggling right now with everything that's going on, especially if you're in retail or e-commerce? I mean, good luck to you, right?
It's so hard. It's so hard. I would think, I have two really strong characteristics that I did not develop. I really believe I was born with them. And I think they help. One is that I am innately trusting. If my distrust hackles go up, I know there's a problem because I am very, very trusting and I'm very happy about that. People have said in the past that's, you shouldn't be that way. I do not believe that. Secondly, I've been accused of leading by cheerocracy. It's not a real word. I love the man who made it up. I am innately positive. And I think if you are in any kind of position where you are the other, meaning there weren't a lot of women in hardware when I started, there still aren't a lot, but there are more. You have to figure out how to find your passion in what you're doing. And I was always very optimistic. My community was supportive and I wanted to support them back. Now, underlying all of this is that we have almost always done very well, which I have to admit that because it's not just like, oh, everything was always so wonderful. We always had sales. Even when our two stores that failed were failing, the other stores were able to help financially support them. And so we had a lot of positive things happening, which allowed being a positive person to continue to, not having a lot of stress. So I would say trust and attitude. Things are never perfect. Never, ever, ever. And if you expect people to be perfect, products to be perfect, your days to be perfect, you will always be disappointed. Mark and I have always said we've never had a bad day, meaning every day is fine. We're not disappointed. We're going to have some bad ones. And then tomorrow's going to be a better one or whatever, which might sound a little, kumbaya to some people, but
I like it.
I do too. I'm going with it. That's my answer.
I love that. I love that. I think there's something energetically too, because when you stay there, then you're only bringing more of that energy into your life rather than dwelling on the things that are going bad. I was actually just having a conversation with my partner about this morning, and I'm going to totally butcher what she said, but it was something like your worries are prayers to the universe. Like if you're always constantly worrying, then I was like that's your prayer to the universe, then to manifest that, because that's where you're spending all your time and all your energy is in the worry or the things that might go wrong or are not going right. So I think that is a superpower. It is a superpower. And then it only continues to manifest more good outcomes. And then, of course, because your glass is half full, you're going to see outcomes differently than other people might.
Yes.
Who might have a more negative perception. And I think that when you're working with other people, Gina, they need that. They need that. You might have been the only smile that they saw that day, or, and you're that is an energy that is uplifting. I think when there's, people talk about toxic bosses or toxic work culture, it's negativity, I think is really the through line there.
It is.
Where people are negative and they share that. So I think that the opposite of how you live your life and how you were doing that. I think that is, I mean, that is not kooky. I don't think that's who
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I think that's a strategy. That is a strategy.
Yeah.
Like in
I
life,
also, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was also going to say that there are so many resources that people don't take advantage of. If you, and I mean, I've seen this time and time again, find a business coach, find a mentor, pester a friend, find another business owner I mean, I recently launched a video series with a friend of mine who is also a business owner, and we were going to breakfast once a month, and we would just talk about business, and we were each other's support group. And I think a lot of times people think, well, I'm the only one with this problem, or no one can help me, or maybe I can't afford to pay for help. Figure out how to get help. None of us are alone. There are lots and lots of resources. And I think that makes a big difference too with when people are struggling and, knowing when to quit. We knew we had to close those doors. We didn't, some people just, they don't want to do it. They don't want to be seen as a failure, and there is no failure. If you've tried and it didn't work, it didn't work.
I think that's such, again, sage advice. We just joined the entrepreneurial organization, EO.
Cool.
Yeah. EO. And I think EO is like, there's all different levels depending on where your revenue is, and they're global. And that's exactly correct. It's like it's just like an opportunity to get together with other founders, and they can just openly share. Right. Yeah. They can share what's going on with them. And one of the pieces that we got out from the speaker that we had yesterday, it was my first EO meeting, but they kind of talked about what you just said. They said, focus on what's going right. If you spend energy or you look at what's going right, that can guide your decisions. Yeah. Because most of us will spend a lot of time on what's going wrong. We get wrapped around the axle of what's going wrong. We're trying to make that work. But if you really get honest about your business and you try to think about, okay, what is actually going right? Go in that direction. And maybe that requires that you pivot. Yep. Right? That you just get honest with yourself. You pivot and you change your business model. So I think that's spot on, sage advice. So be positive, find people who can counsel you or just listen to you, and then seek advice, right? Yeah. Seek advice. You're not alone. I think, like you said, or I said, most people start as accidental entrepreneurs, as you did, right? Yeah. We don't know. Yeah. Nobody knows. We just figure, so we just go along.
I opened a business with 25,000 items, and I didn't know how to use a damn one of them. Maybe one. I knew how to tape things. Used to want to tape. But I mean, I didn't know how to use the tools. I didn't know how to fix plumbing. I didn't know how to change a dimmer and a light switch. But
you didn't need to.
I didn't need to.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the other thing is like knowing what you have to know and and then also knowing what you don't have to know about. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think that's also really critical. Okay. All right, Gina. Well, we're going to wrap up. Okay. This is a wonderful conversation. Our last question we always ask folks, because we do believe that business should be about expanding philanthropy. Right. So solving real world problems in addition to selling things or making money. It's about what are the goals and objectives of what we're doing with that capital. So we try to bring that back in everything that we do. So we always ask our guests if there's a organization, movement, campaign, charity that's close to your heart that you would like our listeners to learn about or to support. What would that be for you, Gina?
Thank you. I'm very excited because after 2.5 years, I feel like I have found not my next purpose, but I get excited about a lot of things. We do a lot of philanthropy. But I was introduced recently to a woman who started an app. It's called Rasa Legal, RASA-legal. She started in Park City to help expunge criminal records. And the light bulb went off in that everything that I feel like I was trying to do in hiring people was to make sure that people had equal opportunities. And I could only hire so many of those folks. And this feels like the next logical extension, because if you go and apply for a job and you have a record that's 20 years old and someone does a background check and they see that record, you are very likely to not be hired. You're likely to not get housing. You're likely to not get Medicaid or Medicare because you can be shot down for that reason in applying for those kinds of government benefits. And I am going to spend 2026 figuring out how to bring this program to Washington, D.C. I'm so excited about it. Yeah.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
And how full circle for you.
Well,
That
that's
is so
exactly how
cool.
it feels. Yes. Oh my gosh. This poor young woman probably thought I was nuts because we were having a Zoom call. Someone said, "Oh, you need to know Noella." And I called her. Neither one of us remembered why we should know each other. And she started talking and I was like, I was so, can you tell? And I
Yes.
said, and she had, it's not an inexpensive, she needs to expand it costs money for her to expand. And she's only in 2 states now. She's in Utah and Arizona. And I said, I'm bringing you to Washington, D.C. What's it going to cost? And, she was probably like, who's this nut job? Of course you are. I've heard that a million times. It's going to happen. Yeah. That's where I figured, I feel like 2.5 years into my retirement, I feel like I've found a really strong purpose.
Wow. What a gift for you and for everyone's lives that you can help impact through that work, Gina. That is tremendous. So lovely having you on. Thank you so much for your generosity and working through all those technical issues.
Thank you, seriously, for putting up with it. Yes.
Yeah. And I guess I'll see you in Milwaukee in April.
Yeah. In April. Yes. Maybe before. You never know. Yeah.
You never know.
You never know.
All right. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you.